It's slightly wider below the equator than above the equator.
A little chubbier.
A little chubbier.
Yeah.
Chubby's a good way. It's like pear-shaped.
Yeah.
So, it turns out the pear-shapedness is bigger than the height of Mount Everest above sea level.
Let's just look at what Neil deGrasse Tyson is actually depicting here. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out how the Earth looks when we examine what Neil deGrasse is just telling us right now. This is what the Earth really looks like.
An oblate spheroid means that it's kind of, well, Neil deGrasse Tyson says pear-shaped.
Not only that, but then we are told it's pear-shaped.
Okay, so now he's saying it's like pear-shaped. So this is a pear, and
you all are fucking idiots. Your inability to understand a metaphor is at a level of a second grader. You see, kids, there are these things called context clues, which let us know the meaning of a sentence based on the context around it. Which is why you can say the sentence, "You're on fire," and it can mean that someone is doing a great job, or it can mean that you need to call the fire department. Why don't we take a look at some of the context clues that Neil deGrasse Tyson gave us in order for us to better understand what he actually meant.
So, Earth, throughout its life, even when it formed, it was spinning, and it got a little wider at the equator than it does at the poles. So it's not actually a sphere, it's oblate, and officially it's an oblate spheroid. That's what we call it. But not only that, it's slightly wider below the equator than above the equator.
A little chubbier.
A little chubbier.
Yeah.
Chubby's a good way. It's like pear-shaped.
Yeah.
So it turns out the pear-shapedness is bigger than the height of Mount Everest above sea level.
Now, kids, did you catch that context clue? We are told that the southern hemisphere is about 6 miles taller than the northern hemisphere, because that's about how tall Mount Everest is. For those of you who are visually challenged, I'm going to present to you a nice little representation of Earth. Now, I made this representation 7,917 pixels across and 7,917 pixels from top to bottom, which means it is the diameter of the Earth if each pixel is 1 mile. On this Earth that I've created for you, I am going to build a mountain that is 6 pixels tall, or 6 miles tall. Once I've done that, I'm going to zoom out, and I want you, dear flat Earth viewer, to tell me in which part of my planet here that you think I drew the mountain. Alright, that's enough time for you. Can you find it? I bet you can't, because it's fucking small. That is how small of a difference we are talking about when we are referring to a pear-shaped Earth. It is tiny. It is insignificant. I will even show you where I drew my little mountain. It is so minuscule that you can't even find it on a scale model. So that's our first context clue. All right, kids, let's take a look at our second context clue.
Earth has been misrepresented to us by geologists because the globes that you buy, that you rub your fingers over and you feel the Himalayas and you feel the Rocky Mountains, no, okay? These mountains are puny compared to the size of the Earth. You would not know they were there. If you were truly that size, some big cosmic giant lumbering through space, coming upon the Earth, rubbing your hand on it, the depth of your what do you call these things?
Your finger.
The fingerprint mark. The depth of that would be greater than the entire range of distance from the Marianas Trench in the bottom of the Pacific to the top of Mount Everest.
Did you hear that? Did you hear how he described what the shape of the Earth would be if you were actually big enough to touch it, like a globe in a classroom? And the way that he describes it is that you could not be able to feel the difference between the top of the highest point on Earth and the lowest point on Earth, because those distances are so incredibly insignificant that they don't make a difference when it comes to the grand scale that is the Earth. This is exactly what I pointed out in the drawing that I made. So now you can understand why some of the photos that you get from NASA look like spheres and you don't get to see the chubby part or the oblate part. Now, one might want to just dismiss you as idiots, and part of me does, because I think calling all of you idiots is a kindness. I actually think that you are just dishonest fucks, because you have blatantly taken Neil deGrasse Tyson out of context. You just focus on the fact that he used a metaphor that says it's a pear-shaped Earth, and completely ignore the two context clues that he gives you afterwards to explain to you how much of a difference this pear shape actually is. But I think that the thing that clinches it for me the most is what Neil deGrasse Tyson has to say at the very end of his interview.
So we've been fed this misrepresentation of our own planet on the belief that, in fact, we have real surface features. But cosmically speaking, we're practically a perfect sphere.
Did you hear that, bitches? Did you hear what he said? Cosmically speaking, we're a perfect sphere. You have very conveniently ignored this last sentence to promote this stupid idea that somehow scientists think that the Earth should look like a fucking pear. You are all dishonest fucks. And every flat earther who ever restates such a stupid statement as the fact that scientists think that the Earth should be pear-shaped is either a fucking moron who doesn't understand the importance of context, or, like you five, or such a dishonest fuck that you are willing to take people out of context in order to score cheap points. You are all fucking disgusting.